Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Take Your Points. I'm your host, Ronan Scott. This week's guests are Kevin Niblock, the former Antrim player. He's on to talk about the weekend's action, the Monaghan Armagh game and the Tyrone Donegal match. And Gerard O'Kane, the Gaelic Life columnist, is going to talk about Derry Miners' All-Ireland victory and also a look ahead to the Ulster final. So Kevin, thanks for coming into the show this week. There's been a lot on at the weekend. We had a load of matches on in the Ulster Championship, but I wanted to start just by the decision, or just to start to talk about the decision about the Ulster final being moved to Croke Park and on Saturday. Do you think it was the right call?
Yeah, I think it probably was. Definitely from a player's point of view, playing in front of 18,000 when you've had a hard slog all year, training away and getting through Ulster Championship. But I think it's a fair enough reward, and for the size of the stadium, 18,000 should be able to be safely held. I suppose the obvious thing is, the before and afters maybe on a Saturday evening is a concern, but I think if managed correctly, it's the right decision. I definitely think in normal circumstances, there's nothing beats a packed Clonus and Ulster final day, but given the nature of things at the minute, I think all the players would have bit your hand off for Croke Park at the start of the year.
It's going to be Monaghan and Tyrone, obviously, but just to look back at the weekend, Monaghan played Armagh in that absolute cracker of a game. It was an absolute goal fest. What did you take from that game? What was your big takeaways? What do you think you learned about Monaghan, I suppose, to start?
Probably the first thing I think everyone would be saying was it's just so refreshing to see a game of football end to end. Blanket defences, things like that. You could talk about maybe defending, and I suppose both managers picked through the defend in terms of the score. I know one of the commentators on Sky was talking about it was more like a hurling score, but from a spectacle point of view, it was brilliant. From an attack and play point of view, I think Monaghan, especially in the first half, mixed up really well. I think the ability of the half-back line, McInnesby, O'Connell, Lavelle, these boys who run hard, were popping it off, but also the ability to kick early ball in, and McManus and McCarn were making serious hay, and I was very impressed by Armagh obviously responding each time, and I think one big thing with Armagh was just getting early ball in to the full forward line. I think they did that really well in the first half, and full credit to both teams for putting on a great show.
Mm-hmm. It was just such a surprise the way they played. I was listening to Conley Gilligan, and he expected it to be like a bit of a dour event, and he admitted himself we did not see that coming, how open it was. And I did read one saying that they felt that the Armagh were kicking themselves because of their defensive situation, but there must have been some reason why they played that way. Yeah,
I suppose maybe from a point just let it go. But they realise, Armagh have serious forwards, and I think everyone knows that at the minute, and they have a good defence too, but their attack and play throughout the league, and it showed there that the O'Neill brothers, Campbell, etc., and Grugan's a great player too, they really backed themselves, and I suppose looking back on it, one big play even from the first goal, a fundamental error in the half forward line and off the ground ball led to a goal ultimately. But I suppose that summed up how Monaghan played. I think if you look back on the goal, one big thing that struck me was how quickly McCarn moved it to the on-running half back, who obviously gave it to McManus, and the rest obviously he's going to finish from there. But it was just end to end, and the fitness levels for both teams in heat like that were a credit to both camps in terms of the conditioning they're in. So the open style of play was there to be seen, and I think Monaghan going into the Ulster final would be ideal. They were really good, but Bonty will have plenty to talk about in the weeks ahead to try and refocus for Tyrone, which they'll need to, because Tyrone obviously will be a massive task. Yeah, so it's like, it's better that there was things to learn. It's better that it wasn't a perfect form. It's better that it wasn't a hammering session. Yeah, well, funny, I was sitting watching my father, and he's like, it's not over yet. And I was like, other goal, I think it's over. And Armagh kept coming back, and that how they were cut open will definitely be a major talking point for the Monaghan camp. But their attacking play is as good as I've seen in a long time. So they have balance in the squad there, and I suppose even looking at Monaghan, surprising. I suppose one thing goes under the radar, like Kieran Hughes and Colin Walsh coming off the bench. Starters for years. The squad seems to be very, very deep. Yeah, I mean, one of the things about Dublin is they've got a great bench. That's how they can get past teams. But Monaghan are proving that they've got that too, because those guys are seasoned campaigners. Yeah, and like looking even at Tyrone, they had McCain to come back in, but I think that's one of the things that I took from Monaghan when we're building up to an Ulster final there, that you know, you've boys champing at the bit to get on, and the boys that came on played really well too and contributed. And same as Armagh, you know, the subs they ran contributed, I think, 1-3 and 1-4 to the game. So, you know, having that big squad is vital.
It seems mad to say it, like, but do you see McGeaney going after this, or is he definitely going to be there? Because Cal, you know, said in previous weeks that he thinks that this is a must-win game for McGeaney, or he's got nowhere else to go because he's been there for so long.
I don't think so. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in Armagh football at the minute, but what I know about McGeaney, I suppose, yeah, criticals jump on, haters, but they've made progress. You know, they have made progress. Armagh before McGeaney weren't as good as they are now, and he's got boys buying in. You know, one thing, I think Armagh, if you're really looking at towards the end of the game, you know, those fouls will be kicking themselves. You know, McGeaney's aggressive in the way he played. You know, I played against many Kildare team he played for, and you know, you got a few ribs tickled those, and it's the same. And the boys are up for it. And I think one of the things is just learning maybe to switch off. You know, that last few minutes when it had to be a wee bit more calm and composed. There's maybe a few aggressive closed fist tackles that, you know, I think that's one thing they'll really learn from going the next year. But they've made great progress, and you know, I think he deserves at least another year.
The perhaps that challenge is that they're playing in a period when there's so many good teams, you know, like they're trying to get up there, whereas Monaghan are getting better every year. Tyrone have come out, you know, even looks like a Derry a lot, like against Donegal,
yeah.
And then Donegal as well. So there's a lot of good teams that they try to get there, you know.
Definitely.
But they have made progress.
Yeah, they have, and how they perform Division 1 and sort of safely maintain that Division 1 status is massive for Armagh moving into next year. Just the nature of championship, obviously, it's not ideal, and knockout is what it is. But I think they'll get great, you know, knowledge in the fact that their performance against the top tier teams in Ireland were consistent this year.
The other semi-final was Tyrone Donegal. Now, how serious do you think that loss will be for Donegal?
I suppose you mentioned Derry. Like, there's, you know, Derry will be kicking themselves. You know, watch that game and Derry will be kicking themselves. I suppose that was a big warning sign. You know, I think a lot of people backed that was going to be close coming into it. And the fact that Derry ran Donegal close probably give Tyrone a lot of emphasis going into it, and ultimately, you know, they didn't look like what they have been the last few years. You know, I don't think it obviously helped two of their biggest players not playing for the majority of the game, but, you know, all credit to Tyrone, they stuck to their task and they ran out, and, you know, a lot of the, I suppose, subtle tactical changes Dooher and Logan are making, even the likes of Niall Sludden at wing half back, who kicked 3 points, I thought was outstanding. He's a great player, but I suppose forwards coming late onto the ball like that, seeing a lot more, even looking at Antrim this year, and Dermot McAleese playing that 5 and kicking 2 points, you know, that's, I suppose, a tactic that's coming into Gaelic a lot more now. But, you know, as a game, it was definitely very different. Obviously, a lot more defensive minded, and yeah, ultimately, really, Tyrone were fully deserved to the win in the end.
Do you think had, you know, McGee and Murphy stayed on the whole game, then the result would have been different?
To be honest, the first thing I thought when McGee went off, you know, I think McGee's irreplaceable in that full back line. I suppose not getting into the big talking points throughout the game in terms of maybe some of the refereeing decisions, but yeah, that was big in terms of being irreplaceable, I think, from that full back line. And then, you know, Murphy wasn't having his best day. You expect so much from him consistently, and he always is that. But, you know, the likes of Hampsey's up there with the best in terms of man marking, someone that physical. And there's probably a bit of frustration, probably a bit of rustiness. You know, he's had the injuries, and, you know, when he went off, I think Donegal stuck to the task well, and that goal gave them the lifeline at the start of the second half, but it was going to be too much for a Tyrone team like that to keep that up for the full 70-75 minutes. It's
got to be so frustrating for Donegal. You know, the game, they missed the penalties and they've missed chances in the game, and this was the year they're supposed to bounce back after the Cavan defeat in Ulster final, you know, and they didn't get it, like, you know, and they must think, because they aren't a bad team, you know, and they've got so much good players, you know, and so much quality there.
Yeah, well, Cavan maybe planted a seed. You know, like, that was theirs to win last year, and obviously Cavan did it, and, you know, not to get into the psychology of it, but they're great footballers, you know, there's no doubt about that, Donegal, and you see what they're doing underage. But yeah, I suppose when you see the likes of Murphy missing a penalty, I don't think anyone in the country, when they see Murphy line up for a penalty, is expecting him to miss it. So there's a bit of a Marcus Rashford sort of hitting the post and going wide, but it just didn't happen for them. You know, it just didn't happen for them, and like, Tyrone got their matchups really good. You know, you look at Langan, you know, he was being tracked around the pitch, so I think Tyrone got a lot of the calls spot on the day to let their more sort of impactful players, and even the likes of Brennan probably didn't have the impact he usually does. So, you know, Tyrone definitely had that chance to sit back, watch the Derry game, and I think got their match-up spot on.
How much do you think that Tyrone is a carry-on really from the Mickey Hart era? Like, how much have they taken from what Mickey Hart was doing and just carried it on, or how much is it their own sort of, you know?
It's probably too early to say. You know, like at the end of the day, Mickey Hart, being the manager for so long, has set them up, got the right mentality. Obviously, he's moved on, but you know, those two men coming in, you know, obviously I don't know too much about them, but as players and as men, they're great at what they do. And combining the two heads, the old saying, two heads is better than one, and they seem to be doing it well at the minute. And you know, I don't know what the story was. Obviously, we saw McKenna coming off the bench in the season he had last year, and I suppose a lot of people were talking about after that game the full back, the nicking out of full back, herring up the pitch, and even not to go for the big wonder score and just to pop it off. You know, showed a lot of for me in that moment of what the squad's about. Yeah,
there's a lot of potential there. You know, you always sort of, people before Mickey left, people thought it was like Alex Ferguson leaving. You know, that sort of transition between two managers would be difficult to do, but they don't seem like they have had a problem with it. How much is that to do with them managing the under-20s?
Yeah, and you know, in Tyrone you're always going to get that calibre of player. It's about getting it right, and you know, you've young boys who look like they're kicking on, maybe taking a step back. It's tough to keep that up, but you know, the competition's there, the structure in place, and you know, with McShane and McKenna and those boys coming back, and you know, as I said before, the likes of Sludden move half back. There's only so many places on a team, but it seems very healthy, and looks like the likes of McGeary's kicked on again. You know, McGeary's a great player. He's 8 or 9 out of 10 and maybe all facets of the game, in my opinion, and you know, he really showed his worth there. So people were talking about Donnelly maybe not having a great game, but that's probably a great sign. You know, 2 years ago they relied on the likes of PD and Matthew having all-star type seasons, and you know, other boys are stepping up now, and I suppose it's the likes of, you know, McCurry, who always plays at a certain level, who looks like he's gone up another gear to maybe hold on to his place further down the line when the McShanes and these boys come back in, and it's a great headache to have.
And going into the final, they're coming from two different places. You know, like Tyrone weren't really expected to be there, you know, despite them being a brilliant team. But whereas Monaghan were the team that we see winning the Ulster title, so there maybe more pressure on Monaghan then in the final, or what would you say?
It'd be hard to say now. Like, you know, if Monaghan look back on that, you know, Monaghan will not get those looks against Tyrone, those 4 goal opportunities, and all credit to Monaghan, they took every one of those opportunities really in the first half. And the efficiency side of things, you know, Monaghan will take, you know, a lot of encouragement from that going into the game. But what Dooher really and Logan looked to do was analyse the game Derry and Donegal played, and I'd say they'll do the very same thing against Armagh and Monaghan, and really look at those matchups. And you know, Tyrone will definitely go in as slight favourites, but I think the focus looks good in Tyrone. You know, so you'd have them slight favourites, but you know, definitely Monaghan are capable of a small upset.
Okay, so you're saying that Tyrone would be the slight favourites over the two, just based on the performance against Donegal and knocking Donegal out, or?
Yeah, I suppose the strength of the defence there, really, when it came to it. You know, you'd look at really the amount Monaghan leaked, and that would worry you. You know, from that point of view, with what Tyrone have to offer there in the forward line. What Tyrone have to offer with their strength in the running game as well. So yeah, you would have to put them slight favourites, but definitely wouldn't rule out Monaghan, especially with everything that's gone on, and wouldn't rule them out without that, you know, the terrible news. But you know, that could be a massive factor too to motivate those boys even more.
Yeah, the death of the under-20 captain. It was a real shame that you know, it's awful thing to happen, and everybody says it just sort of puts football into perspective, doesn't it?
Very much so, very much so. So you know, and all credit to the boys, because it must have been serious hard to get up for that game, and they came through it, you know. And you know, if they had been beat, it would have been God, you would know, you know, how did we go home and feel. But so that'll give them encouragement, and you know, hopefully, I suppose a lot of the neutrals will be looking for them to go on and win it for that fact alone.
Yeah. If we look at Ulster in general, you know, what you've got is Donegal expected to do well this year, dropped out. Derry came strong, almost beat Donegal. Tyrone are in a final, Monaghan are in a final. Mm-hmm. You know, Armagh, look, our Division 1 team, you know, where is Antrim in this mix? Where do you see, you know, where can Antrim push up the ranks there?
Well, they have pushed on. You know, Antrim are a lot better. Obviously, getting Division 3 status was the ultimate goal at the start of the year, and they got that, and quite convincingly, like, and you know, I suppose you're looking at the positives of Antrim. Definitely the first half they looked the better team against Armagh. I know a lot of people have said that. One of the biggest negatives, ultimately, it was a big difference in the scoreline at the end of the day. And you know, even the body language leaked on the Antrim line. You know, there was no glorious defeat. It was, you know, it was a defeat. And at the end of the day, it was another first round exit. But Antrim have upped it, Derry have upped it. You know, arguably the big counties have sort of maintained and upped it. So everyone seems to be raising their game a bit. So it'll be interesting next year. And if Antrim do get a good positive Division 3 campaign under their belts, and you know, obviously, you know, from an Antrim point of view, you were always, let's call a spade. You were looking at the draw and hoping you were getting, you know, one of the less of the big boys. Will not name names, but you know, you're looking at that, and Antrim probably did look at that this year. They had the nice side of the draw, and they'll be disappointed, you know, because they could have got over the line against Armagh and gone into Monaghan game, and you see how tight that was. So there'd be less in it than you'd think. I think with Antrim, and hopefully the squad stays together, stays tight, and I think they were definitely more cohesive this year. And you definitely thought the line was very good tactically. You could see it, and yeah.
Yeah. So of the team, what were you most impressed about?
Probably the cohesiveness. You know, probably making sure that in the first half, especially, they were patient and build up. They didn't rush it. You know, they ran hard when they needed to. They had the right men on the ball at the right times, and you know, again, a bit like Armagh, there was a few sort of fundamental errors at the start of the second half that cost Antrim a lot. And I suppose disappointing, the heads probably did drop a bit in the second half. You know, you're hoping them to kick on and get a few scores and back, and just the gap widened. And I suppose that's the level of Division 1 teams which you're trying to chase.
Well, what have you heard much coming from out of the squad, from the panel? Like, is the mood good, or what?
Very little, but what I have heard is very positive. You know, obviously Sean Kelly be a good friend and clubmate, and he's involved and managed St. Gall's for 2 or 3 years there, and I've obviously a lot of time with him. And I think, not knowing a lot, but that balance of, you know, you've Stevie O'Neill, you've Enda there, and someone who has that great knowledge of the club scene, which no doubt those boys do now, but you had that, probably them in their ear, and I think that balance definitely showed throughout the league. And you know, you look at that Louth game at the starting off, it's such a big game, and the Sligo game, those were games we've lost in the past in Division 4, and you know, to have that character to come back was massively telling, regardless of the Armagh game.
What do you think about the more senior guys who came back? You know, Paddy Cunningham and McCann and that. I presume they're not. We don't know what the situation is with them. But if they do leave, is that going to be a big blow, or can they fill those gaps?
Yeah, you know, we talked about when Murphy and McGee went off and the impact that had on them. You know, it's the same in Antrim. You know, Paddy, I don't think, probably disappointed didn't get any minutes in the championship in the match ultimately. And Mick, he's going to be 8 out of 10 there every day and keeps things moving. So, you know, I think Mick would definitely give it a go again. But probably, you know, the most encouraging thing was like Oran Eastwood, Owen McCabe from my own club established themselves. Those boys they're not young, but they're not old. You know, they're early 20s, mid 20s, and seem to have sort of got a place nailed down. And even Dermot McAleese, as I mentioned, you know, coming and looking like a nailed on starter. So the competition's definitely there. You know, even the small brothers, who I'm very impressed with, neither of them started. Connor came off the bench. So the competition looks to be there, you know, and it seems like they've the right team in there to keep everyone focused. Like. So
what they need then actually is for the league to be a proper league, not a 3-game COVID league, you know, where the 4 games or whatever it is. They need a 7-game league, possibly a final, and they need a backdoor in the championship, so they're going to get 7 or 8 games.
I think next year, you know, it's been a success, but I think those boys will definitely say, right, well, here's the 7 games. Quality opposition. The jump from 4 to 3 is massive, just as the jump in anything. And you know, if they can maintain, you know, but we've seen counties, and Antrim did it a few years back, going from 4 to 3 to 2. You know, and if you keep building that momentum, I definitely wouldn't be surprised if Antrim were right up the top of Division 3 and pushing for promotion spots next year.
One of the reasons why Antrim perhaps have been so successful is the competitive championship. You know, in the past couple of years, I know Cargan have won 3 in a row, but every year it's a shootout between 3 or 4 teams at the top. You know, the Lavjerg and Portland Own going to 3 games. You know, we're seeing more competition in Antrim, like we're seeing in other counties like the Tyrones, Donegals, and Monaghans.
Yeah.
How do you see it going this year on Antrim?
It's definitely going to be as competitive as ever been, I think. You know, you've obviously, as you mentioned, Cargan will see themselves as the best, and at the minute they are. They're county champions. Craigan, definitely think they probably let one slip by them the last few years. Lavjerg will always fancy themselves, as with St John's and Portland Own. You know, or as you say, definitely making steady progress each year, and will be fully motivated. So yeah, it's really competitive there at the minute, and the round robin nature this year will definitely be a bit of a sussing out match, and getting into those quarterfinals, there'll not be much in it. So I think it's definitely going to be competitive as ever, and yeah, there'll be a lot of clubs, you know, hunting down Corrigan.
Big time, big time. Kevin, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we're joined remotely by Gerard O'Kane, the Gaelic Life columnist. So I'd like to welcome Gerard to the show. And I wanted to start by asking you, Gerard, well, the Derry Miners won the All-Ireland final last weekend. A massive result for the county. What did you think of the game, and what does it mean for Derry?
I have to say that I thought both teams performed remarkably well. I was at the game myself, so I was in the stand in the shade, and being out in the field after it, I was able to appreciate the heat that the guys were playing in, and for the game to still ebb and flow right up to the 63rd, 64th minute just shows you a testament to both teams. Given it was a 1 point game, it definitely could have went either way, but the performance from both sides in terms of their score taking, their running power, some of the passing, some of the foot passing, and both the running game with the hand passing was exceptional. The performance from Derry, I suppose I can probably critique a bit more on it because it's the third or fourth time I've seen them. And I have to say, every time I've seen them, I've just been really impressed by the composure they're showing for guys who are only 17, 18 in terms of their decision making on the ball and both off it. Very, very rarely do you see them run up blind alleys or lose the ball in the tackle. They all are quite comfortable with both their hands and their feet and switching the ball to the other side of the field. They all play heads up football, and from that point of view I have to say I was really impressed. In terms of what it means going forward for the county, I'll have to look back on my own career, and I remember standing in Monaghan on the Monday night after we had won the minor title in 2002 and making a declaration that Derry would win Sam within 4 or 5 years. And when I look back on it now, I sort of cringe at it. If you look at the 93 victory, it was maybe built around all the good work we've been doing in the schools, plus the fact that Derry had an 83 and an 89 minor winning team come together. Going forward, definitely success at minor level is no guarantee for success at senior level. However, what it will do is that if it's Rory Gallagher in the short term or whoever in the long term, it will give Derry a far bigger pool of players to pick from. The players there that are on show have been in and around development squads since they were 14, 15, 16, so they know what it takes at that level to play at the elite level. So moving up into under 20s, into seniors, it'll be no surprise or shock to the system, and I think that will definitely augur well for the pool of players that Derry will have. The Derry team at the minute is quite young, so it will only push them guys on, and definitely it'll create more competition for places. In terms of transferring that into success, well, I suppose I think year on year that gap gets bigger between the top teams and everyone coming behind them, but it definitely puts Derry on a better foot for challenging in Ulster in the next 3 to 4 years.
Gerard, I wanted to ask you about the Ulster Championship, or Ulster Championship in general. What have you thought of it this year?
The Ulster Championship so far this year, I have to say, has been a breath of fresh air whenever you're comparing it to the other provincial championships. Whenever you look at the games which took place at the weekend between Armagh and Monaghan on Saturday, Tyrone and Donegal on Sunday, and if you even reflect further back to the Derry-Donegal game last week, you're getting to see that the gap in Ulster is maybe closing, in that for a few years there, Tyrone, Monaghan and Donegal had sort of a monopoly on it, in that they were probably sweeping all other teams aside whilst won it. Looking at the competition over the last 4 or 5 weeks, the standard of the overall teams in it is definitely improving. Derry and Armagh are now up there in terms of challenging and pushing the other perceived top 3. Looking at the game with Derry and Donegal, 1 point game, could have went anyway. Again, looking at the games of the weekend, Armagh with a point up in the 67th minute, I'm sure in the first half they took your hands off for it and they just couldn't see it out. And then the game on Sunday, wherever you look at, was a 6 point game, but Tyrone had an extra man for 40 minutes, and given that man was Michael Murphy that Donegal was missing, the game would probably been a lot closer. So I think overall, you have to say it, if you're looking at comparisons between provinces, the Ulster Championship has really opened up the championship this year. Also in terms of the way it's been played, I see people referring to it as the games are cricket scores or hurling scores, and so they are. The games are being played and the forwards are probably standing out more this year than the defenders. That's a testament to all the good work being done throughout all the counties.
They made the decision, Gerard, to play the Ulster final in Croke Park. You know, what sort of effect will that have on both teams, and what will it mean for them?
I think it'll lend itself to an open and expansive game. I don't see it being a game where the teams go out and try and crowd out each other's forward line, play men behind the ball and try and grind out a 12-10-1. I can see both teams using the space in Croke Park and firstly looking for their own players before they start looking at the other team, and I think that both teams will be hitting in around the 20-point mark. With regards to who will win, it's probably a 2 or 3 point game either way at this stage, and looking at the results so far and the way games have panned out, I'm probably putting my hat in Monaghan, but that's not to say that Tyrone wouldn't surprise me if they end up 2 or 3 point winners. I think it'll be an open affair, and I think actually the two goalkeepers for either side will be vitally important. I'm not sure if you noticed Niall Morgan's positioning on Sunday versus Donegal, where when Sean Patton was taking kickouts, bear in mind that Donegal were a man down already. Niall Morgan was standing nearly right in the centre of the pitch and disrupting any sort of space that Patton had to hit. And both Morgan and Beggan themselves are very adept at going long, going short, finding men. But I think if Morgan sort of tries that in Croke Park against Beggan has maybe the ability to nearly go over the top of him, depending on where he positions himself. Both keepers have the ability to come out and join the attack and join the play, which they very often do, especially Rory Beggan, and adds that extra man. Whether they get the ball or not is immaterial, but they're causing confusion, they're taking the defender away, and I think going to see both keepers in Croke Park try this sort of approach, it'll be an interesting approach. Given that they're both really good free takers, I think that the game actually will come down to a big tactical battle between the goalkeepers.
And finally, we've been discussing provincial structures for a number of weeks in this show. I wanted to get your thoughts on what you think. You know, will it be changed? Should it be tweaked? Should it be changed completely? What's your thoughts, Gerard?
I think the provincial championships will stay, but in terms of their current structure, I think they maybe going forward there will be a change that they might be decoupled from the All-Ireland Series, in that the Ulster Championship, Leinster, Munster and will all be separate from the All-Ireland Series, and your standing in the All-Ireland Series will now be down to your league placings, whether they go for the top two divisions playing off the All-Ireland, which is the way that they're going to do, and then the bottom two divisions playing the Tailteann Cup. I don't think that the provincial championship will be any guide now into how a team progresses in the All-Ireland Series. The results over the past few years are lending itself to that the provincial championships are now becoming cannon fodder for the smaller teams, are becoming cannon fodder for the so-called bigger teams. I don't think that Cavan won last year in Ulster and Tipperary won in Munster is a sign of what could happen or a sign of change, because given the year that was in it, it was a winter championship, COVID preparations and all that sort of thing rolled into one. It was probably the perfect storm for an underdog to win a provincial championship last year. I know if you're looking at Sunday past in Leinster, Meath ran Dublin to 5 or 6 points. Again, I don't think that in itself is enough to say, well, hold on a minute, we might just keep them as it is. Dublin have now won 14 out of 15 in their province, with I think the average score over the last 7 or 8 years has been roughly 16-17 points on every victory, and that in itself, if you're looking at the other teams in Leinster, really, what is their goal or what's their aim for the year? And if that's what they're facing into, I only think that down the line then, if you're looking at developing minor teams under 20s, it lends itself to boys thinking, what's the point? They see them over in Connacht, while it's not the one team dominating, you're always having Mayo or Galway. I know Roscommon have won 1 or 2 in the last 10 years, but they seem to be falling away again. But some of the score lines in terms of the championship, again, you're looking at 15-20 point hammerings being handed out, I just think that the time to decouple the provincial championships and move into something different for the Iron Says will come down the line. And I know there's a special congress in October, and I'd imagine that's where that decision will be taken.
Gerard, thanks very much. Okay, that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. See you next time.